The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal floor. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds gathered here every cycle to discuss trade, settle disputes, and make decisions that affected trillions of lives across the galaxy. The air buzzed with the sound of translators working overtime, converting the clicks, hisses, and melodic tones of different species into understandable words. Ambassador Zex Theri of the Velteron Empire sat in his assigned seat, his forearms folded as he listened to yet another boring debate about mining rights. His compound eyes scanned the chamber out of habit, counting the familiar faces and noting the empty seats. That was when he noticed something strange. The human section was empty. Again, Zex Theri's memory was excellent, as all Velteran memories were. He could recall exactly when he had last seen Captain Jake Morrison and Dr. Lisa Hamilton in their seats. It had been 3 full council sessions ago. The humans always sent those 2 as their representatives, and they always sat in the same spot, taking notes on their primitive electronic devices. But now their seats were empty, and no one seemed to care. Zex Theri raised one of his hands to signal for attention. The current speaker, a tall reptilian from the Saurian Republic, paused in his lengthy presentation about water rights. "I wish to raise a question," Zex Theri said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "Where are the human representatives? They have been absent for 3 sessions." A few beings turned to look at the empty human section. Most just continued with their own conversations or data reviews. Council Speaker Threnody, a floating jellyfish-like creature encased in a mobility suit, pulsed with mild annoyance. "The humans have not said word of their absence," she replied, her voice taking on the tone she used for unimportant matters. "Perhaps they are dealing with some internal crisis. You know how emotional and unstable their species can be." Several beings made sounds of agreement. The Korgan delegate, a massive bear-like creature, growled his opinion. "Humans always were unreliable. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their ships are slow and inefficient. Their contributions to this council have been minimal at best. Their voting record shows they rarely supported important initiatives," added the Zephyrian military representative, her blue skin shimmering with disapproval. "They seemed more concerned with what they called ethical considerations than with practical progress." Zex Theri felt something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. He had dealt with humans before in trade negotiations. They were always punctual, always prepared, always polite, even when others were not. For them to simply stop coming without explanation seemed very unlike them. "Should we not investigate their absence?" he asked. "They have been members of this council for 47 standard years." Speaker Threnity's suit flashed with impatience. "If the humans wished to remain active members, they would be here. We have important matters to discuss. The Altarian banking consortium wishes to present their new trade regulations." The discussion moved on, and Zex Theri found himself forgotten. He made a mental note to check on the human situation later, though he wasn't sure why it bothered him so much. Far across the galaxy, in the human colony of New Terra, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood before a massive holographic display showing star charts and fleet positions. The command center buzzed with quiet activity as hundreds of officers coordinated the largest military operation in human history. But this wasn't an invasion or a battle. It was an evacuation. "Admiral, the last transport from Kepler Station has cleared the system," reported Commander Tony Richards, looking up from his console. "All personnel and essential equipment have been recovered." "What about the agricultural facilities?" Sullivan asked, her gray eyes focused on the display. "Left intact, ma'am. The crops are still growing. The automated systems are still running. We've left enough food to feed a small city for years." Sullivan nodded. "It was the same story from every world they had evacuated. 17 colonies, 43 research stations, over 100 trading posts and manufacturing facilities. All abandoned, but all left in perfect working order. The humans had taken their people and their most important knowledge, but they had left behind enough infrastructure and resources to support millions of beings. Admiral, Director Chun is requesting a final meeting before we begin the long journey, said Lieutenant Karen Foster from the communications station. Send him in. Director Sam Chun entered the command center, carrying a tablet filled with reports and data. He was the man responsible for coordinating the civilian side of the evacuation, and he looked tired but satisfied. The last research teams have finished their work, Chun reported. All human-developed technologies have been copied and left in easily accessible databases. Agricultural improvements, medical advances, manufacturing techniques, even our conflict resolution protocols. Everything we've learned in the past 50 years of galactic interaction. And our people? Sullivan asked. Every human citizen who wanted to leave has been evacuated. We've left behind detailed instructions for maintaining all systems along, with enough supplies and equipment to last decades. If other species want to move into our former territories, they'll find everything they need to thrive. Sullivan looked at the star chart one more time. 17 worlds they had been home to. 30 million humans. Worlds where they had built cities, raised families, created new technologies, and tried to build bridges with alien species. Now those worlds would be empty of human presence, though not empty of human gifts. Any word from the Galactic Council? She asked. Chun shook his head. They haven't even noticed we're gone yet. Our ambassadors stopped attending sessions 3 months ago, and no one has sent so much as a message asking where we are. And our trading partners? The Corvin Trade Federation is still sending automated messages to our commercial stations, but they haven't realized that no one is answering. The Zephyrian military is expecting delivery of 50,000 medical kits next month, but they haven't checked to see if our factories are still operating. Sullivan wasn't surprised. In 50 years of galactic citizenship, humanity had learned that most species saw them as useful, but not important. They bought human products, used human services, and benefited from human innovations, but they didn't see humans as equals. They saw them as a convenient resource, like a mining operation or a manufacturing plant. Admiral, the Deep Space Scouts are reporting all clear for the next phase, Commander Richards announced. The path to the Outer Rim is secure. Sullivan looked around the command center one last time. This had been the heart of human space exploration for decades. Maps on the walls showed every human world, every trade route, every diplomatic contact. Soon it would all be history. Begin the final exodus, she ordered. All ships are to proceed to Rally Point Omega. We're going home. But home wasn't Earth anymore. Home was something new, something beyond the reach of species who had never really wanted to understand humanity in the first place. Home was a place where humans could build their own future without having to constantly prove their worth to beings who had already decided they weren't worth much as the last human ships departed. Their territories, they left behind a gift that no one would understand for years to come. They left behind the foundation for a better galaxy, built by a species that had been dismissed as primitive and emotional. The question was whether anyone would be wise enough to recognize the gift for what it was in the Galactic Council chambers. Zexthuri was still wondering why the human seats remained empty. He would continue wondering for a long time. Captain Veltar pressed his clawed hand against the control panel, but nothing happened. The docking bay doors remained sealed, and the station's computer system gave him the same message it had been giving for the past hour. Access denied. Station personnel unavailable. New Boston Station had been one of the busiest trading posts in this sector of space. Veltar had stopped here dozens of times over the years to refuel, trade goods, and get his ship serviced by the human technicians, who seemed to understand Corvan engineering better than most Corvans did. Now the station was dark, except for basic life support, and his ship was running low on fuel. "This makes no sense," he muttered to his navigator, a young Corvan named Jex Ara. "The station is clearly operational. The lights are on, the atmosphere is stable, the docking systems are powered. But where is everyone?" Jexara checked her instruments again. "Captain, I'm detecting no life signs aboard the station. But there are no signs of battle, no emergency broadcasts, no distress signals. It's like everyone just vanished." Veltar had been a traitor for 30 years. He had seen stations abandoned due to war, plague, economic collapse, and natural disasters. This was different. This was like finding a perfectly set dinner table with no one sitting at it. "Try the emergency override codes," he ordered. "Already tried, Captain." "The system acknowledges the codes, but says they can only be activated by station personnel. And according to the computer, there are no station personnel currently aboard." Through the viewports, Veltar could see other ships arriving at the station, only to find the same problem. A Zephyrian cargo hauler was broadcasting frustrated messages. A Veil Taran research vessel was trying to hack the docking systems. Everyone was confused, and no one had answers. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Dr. Yanara stood in her laboratory, staring at a half-finished experiment that would never be completed. The Cetacean Research Institute had been working on a breakthrough in quantum drive technology for the past 2 years. The project had been going perfectly until 6 months ago, when her 2 most important collaborators had simply disappeared. "Computer, display the research files for Lieutenant Paul Martinez and Engineer Amy Brooks," she said. "Files not found," the computer replied in its emotionless voice. Dr. Yanara's tentacles writhed with frustration. This was impossible. Martinez and Brooks had been working on this project for 18 months. They had filled hundreds of data files with calculations, test results, and theoretical models. Their work had been groundbreaking, pushing the boundaries of what anyone thought possible with quantum mechanics. "Computer, search for any files created by human researchers in the past 3 years." Search complete. No files found. It was as if every trace of human involvement in the research had been erased. But that wasn't quite right, either. The erasure had been selective. All the human research was gone, but they had left behind detailed notes explaining their work to their alien colleagues. They had even left suggestions for how to continue the research without them. Dr. Yanara picked up one of these notes, written in Martinez's neat handwriting. "Dr. Yanara, if you're reading this, it means we won't be completing our work together. I want you to know that working with you has been one of the greatest honors of my career. Your insights into quantum mechanics are brilliant, and I believe you can finish what we started. I've left all our calculations translated into Cetacean mathematical notation. The breakthrough is closer than you think." Reading the note, Dr. Yanara felt something she had never experienced before. It was sadness mixed with respect and a growing sense that something terrible had happened. Not terrible in the sense of violence or disaster, but terrible in the sense of loss. A loss that no one seemed to understand yet. Across the galaxy, General Kexton was discovering his own version of this mystery. The Zephyrian military had always prided itself on being the most advanced fighting force in known space. Their weapons were powerful, their ships were fast, and their soldiers were well equipped. What General Kexton was learning was that much of that equipment came from human manufacturers. "General, we have a problem," reported Colonel Nixara, entering the war room with a tablet full of bad news. "Our supply lines are collapsing." "Explain," Kexton ordered, though he suspected he already knew what she was going to say. "Sir, we've been trying to reorder medical supplies, combat armor, and ship components from our usual suppliers. Most of our orders have been going to human-operated facilities. Those facilities are no longer responding to communications. Have you tried contacting other suppliers? Yes, sir. The non-human suppliers can't match the quality or quantity we need. It turns out the human manufacturers were producing 60% of our specialized equipment. Their factories were more efficient, their quality control was better, and their prices were lower than anyone else in the galaxy. General Kexdane felt a cold feeling in his stomach. What about our weapon systems? Sir, the new plasma rifles we've been using for the past 5 years? Human design. The improved body armor that reduced casualty rates by 40%? Human materials science. The medical trauma kits that have saved thousands of lives? Human biotechnology. The general sat down heavily in his chair. The Zephyrian military had spent decades looking down on human military technology, calling it primitive and ineffective. What they had failed to realize was that humans had been quietly improving Zephyrian technology from behind the scenes, making it better without taking credit for it. How long can we maintain current operations with existing supplies? He asked. 3 months, sir. Maybe 4, if we ration carefully. 3 months. General Kexden had been planning military operations that would take years to complete. Now he was facing the possibility that his entire military would be reduced to using obsolete equipment within a few months. But the most disturbing discoveries were being made by the exploration teams that had begun investigating the abandoned human colonies. Captain Drixala of the Altarian Survey Corps had been chosen to lead the first official expedition to New Terra, the largest human colony world. What she found there defied all explanation. The colony was perfect. The cities were clean and functional, with power running to every building. The farms were producing crops that were automatically harvested and stored. The factories were still operating, producing goods that no one would ever collect. The transportation systems were running on schedule, carrying no passengers. Captain, this is impossible, said her science officer, Dr. Komura. These systems are too complex to run without constant maintenance. Human colonies should have collapsed within weeks of being abandoned, but they hadn't collapsed. They had been designed to run themselves. Every system had backups, every backup had backups, and every process had been automated to a degree that impressed even the highly technical Altarians. Look at this, Dr. Komura said, pointing to a massive agricultural complex. This single facility could feed a city of 2 million people. The crop rotation is perfect, the soil treatment is automated, and the harvesting systems are more efficient than anything we use on Altair. Captain Drixala walked through the empty streets of what had been New Terra's capital city. The buildings were beautiful, combining human architectural styles with alien influences in ways that created something entirely new. The parks were maintained by automated systems that kept every plant healthy and every pathway clean. Captain, I'm reading massive data storage facilities throughout the city, reported her communications officer. It looks like the humans left detailed instructions for maintaining every system, along with improvements and upgrades that haven't been implemented yet. It was a gift. The entire colony was a gift, left behind by a species that had been dismissed as primitive and emotional. Every human world that the survey teams investigated told the same story. Perfect infrastructure, advanced technology, and detailed instructions for anyone who wanted to take over. But no one was taking over. The other species of the galaxy were too busy arguing about who had the right to claim the abandoned human territories. While they argued, the automated systems continued to work, producing food and goods that no one collected, maintaining cities that no one lived in. 6 months after the humans had disappeared, the galaxy was beginning to experience the first real effects of their absence. Trade routes were failing, supply chains were breaking down, and research projects were stalling. But most species still didn't understand what was happening. They thought they were experiencing a temporary inconvenience. They had no idea they were watching the beginning of a collapse that would change the galaxy forever. Director Zarathul stood before the emergency board meeting of the Altarian Banking Consortium, her crystalline form glowing with stress patterns that everyone in the room could read. The holographic displays around the conference table showed economic data that grew worse by the day. "The situation is becoming critical," she announced, her voice creating harmonic resonances that translated into urgency. "Trade volume has dropped by 37% in the past 18 months. Currency exchange rates are fluctuating wildly. We're seeing bank failures in 17 different systems." Board member Crixenel, an ancient Altarian whose crystal structure had turned deep blue with age, pulsed with confusion. "How is this possible? Our economic models showed stable growth for the next century." Zarathal activated a new display showing financial algorithms and trade calculations. "We've discovered that our economic stability was dependent on computational systems that we didn't fully understand. Systems that were designed and maintained by human financial analysts." The silence in the room was deafening. For decades, the Altarian Banking Consortium had prided itself on having the most sophisticated economic models in the galaxy. Their crystal-based computing systems could process vast amounts of data and predict market trends with amazing accuracy. "You're saying humans were involved in our calculations?" asked another board member, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Not just involved," Zarathul replied. "They were essential. The algorithms that prevented market crashes, the systems that balanced currency exchanges between different species, the predictive models that kept trade flowing smoothly. All of them were created by human economists working with our systems." She activated another display showing the complexity of galactic trade. "Look at this network. Thousands of different species, each with their own economic systems, currencies, and trade preferences. The mathematical complexity of keeping this stable is beyond what any single species could manage alone." "But humans are primitive," protested Crixenel. "Their mathematics are simple, their computers are slow, their understanding of economics is basic." Zarathul's crystal form pulsed with something that might have been regret. "That's what we thought. But we were wrong. Humans didn't solve these problems with advanced mathematics or powerful computers. They solved them with something we don't have, which is understanding. They understood how different species think, how they make decisions, how they react to change. They could predict market behavior, not because they had better computers, but because they had better insight into the minds of the beings making the decisions." The implications were staggering. The Altarian Banking Consortium had been the foundation of galactic economic stability for centuries. If their systems were failing, it meant the entire economic structure of the galaxy was at risk. Meanwhile, on the research station that had once been Commander Alex Turner's pride and joy, Dr. Nethera was making her own disturbing discoveries. The Crystalline Collective had always considered themselves the most advanced researchers in the galaxy. Their ability to process information and conduct multiple experiments simultaneously was legendary. But as Dr. Nethera reviewed the station's research logs, she found patterns that made her crystalline matrix ache with confusion. "Computer, display research productivity data for the past 5 years," she commanded. The data appeared before her in 3-dimensional form, showing the ebb and flow of scientific discoveries across dozens of different fields. What she saw made no sense. "Computer, highlight contributions by human researchers." Nearly half the data points changed color. 53% of the station's breakthrough discoveries had involved human collaboration. Agricultural improvements that had increased crop yields across the galaxy. Medical advances that had extended lifespans for dozens of species. Engineering innovations that had made space travel safer and more efficient. "This cannot be correct," Dr. Nethera muttered. Human science is centuries behind our own. But the evidence was undeniable. She pulled up specific research projects and found the same pattern repeated over and over. A crystalline collective researcher would identify a problem, develop a theoretical solution, and then get stuck on practical implementation. Then a human researcher would join the project, and suddenly the theoretical solution would become a working reality. Dr. Nethera examined the research methods more closely. The humans didn't use more advanced equipment or more sophisticated theories. Instead, they used an approach that the crystalline collective had always dismissed as inefficient. They tried things. Where a crystalline researcher would spend months calculating the perfect solution, a human researcher would build a dozen different prototypes and test them all. Where a crystalline researcher would work alone to avoid contaminating their pure logic, human researchers would collaborate with anyone who had useful knowledge, regardless of their species or status. Computer, show me the current status of ongoing projects that involved human collaboration. The results were devastating. 17 major research projects had stalled completely. 23 others were proceeding at less than half their previous pace. The loss of human involvement had crippled the station's research capabilities, but the worst part was what she found in the personal logs of the human researchers. Commander Turner had left behind detailed notes explaining not just what they had been working on, but why they had approached problems the way they did. Science is not about being right, Turner had written. It's about learning. Every failure teaches us something new. Every mistake shows us a path we shouldn't take. The goal is not to avoid errors, but to make them quickly and learn from them efficiently. Dr. Nethera read these words with growing amazement. The crystalline collective had always been taught that making mistakes was a sign of inferior reasoning. Humans, apparently, made mistakes on purpose. Across the galaxy, the hegemony of worlds was facing its own crisis. The loose alliance of species that had maintained relative peace for centuries was beginning to fracture. Old disputes were resurfacing, territorial claims were being contested, and minor conflicts were escalating into major problems. Chancellor Voxeron of the Hegemony Council couldn't understand what was happening. The peacekeeping systems that had worked for decades were failing. Mediation attempts were breaking down. Species that had cooperated for generations were suddenly at each other's throats. Chancellor, we have another crisis, reported his aide, Commander Flixia. The Saurian Republic and the Korgan Confederation are mobilizing military forces over the Kepler mining dispute. That dispute was settled 3 years ago, Voxeron replied, his tentacles writhing with confusion. Apparently not, sir. Both sides claimed the settlement was unfair. They're demanding new negotiations. Voxeron accessed the records of the original settlement. It had been a complex dispute involving mining rights, environmental protection, and worker safety. The final agreement had been crafted by a team of mediators led by Captain Roy Mitchell, a human diplomat who had specialized in interspecies conflict resolution. Where is Captain Mitchell now? Voxeron asked. Unknown, sir. He stopped responding to communications 18 months ago. His office has been cleaned out, and his staff has been reassigned. Voxeron began to see a pattern. He called up records of other recent disputes and found the same thing. The Altarian-Zephyrian trade war that had been peacefully resolved 2 years ago was flaring up again. The Cetacean-Veltaran border conflict that had been settled through careful negotiation was back in the news. The crystalline collectives, territorial claims against the Saurian Republic, were being challenged. Every single one of these disputes had originally been resolved by human mediators. Computer, show me all interspecies conflicts resolved in the past 5 years. The data was overwhelming. Humans had been involved in mediating over 3,000 disputes, from major territorial conflicts to minor trade disagreements. They had prevented wars, negotiated treaties, and maintained peace between species that had been enemies for centuries. Computer, show me the current status of these resolved conflicts. The results were terrifying. 68% of the conflicts were showing signs of renewed tension. 34% had already escalated to the point where military intervention might be necessary. The careful diplomatic work of decades was unraveling. Roxaron realized with growing horror that humans hadn't just been participants in galactic diplomacy. They had been the foundation of it. Their patient, methodical approach to understanding different species' perspectives had made them uniquely qualified to find solutions that everyone could accept. But they were gone, and the galaxy was remembering how to hate. Council, Speaker Threnody, floated in her private chambers, reviewing reports that painted a picture of growing disaster. Economic collapse, research stagnation, diplomatic breakdown, all happening simultaneously across the galaxy. For the first time in her long career, she began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. She activated her personal files and began searching through archived records of human proposals to the Galactic Council. Proposals that had been dismissed as naive, impractical, or emotionally motivated. As she read through them, a cold realization began to form. Captain Vexandra stood on the bridge of her exploration ship, the deep horizon, watching the stars shift and blur as they dropped out of hyperspace. Her mission was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in practice. Find humanity and convince them to return to save galactic civilization. The Galactic Council had finally authorized the search, after 2 years of economic collapse and social chaos. They had given Vexandra the best ship they could build, the most advanced sensors available, and carte blanche to go anywhere in the galaxy. What they couldn't give her was any idea of where to look. Captain, we're detecting artificial energy. Signatures from the 4th planet in this system, reported her science officer, Lieutenant Kekstar. The readings are consistent with advanced civilization, but the energy patterns are unfamiliar. Vexandra studied the data on her display. They had been searching the Outer Rim territories for 6 months, following rumors and ancient star charts. This was the first sign of advanced life they had found in weeks. Take us in for a closer look, she ordered Dot as they approached the planet. Vexandra felt her confidence begin to waver. The energy readings were not just unfamiliar, they were impossible. The planet was generating more power than most space stations, but there were no massive fusion reactors or antimatter plants visible on the surface. Instead, the energy seemed to be coming from thousands of small, efficient sources scattered across the continents. Captain, I'm receiving a communication, announced Communications Officer Drixella. It's in Standard Galactic, but the transmission method is unlike anything in our databases. Put it through. A calm human voice filled the bridge. Unknown. Vessel, this is New Haven Traffic Control. Please state your purpose and origin. Vexandra felt a surge of excitement. After months of searching empty space, they had finally found them. This is Captain Vexandra of the Galactic Council Exploration Service. We are seeking an audience with human leadership on urgent matters concerning galactic security. There was a pause, then the voice returned. Captain Vexandra, you are cleared to land at coordinates 12.7 north, 45.3 east. A representative will meet you there. As the deep horizon descended through the atmosphere, Vexandra and her crew stared in amazement at what they saw below. The human cities were unlike anything in known space. Buildings seemed to grow from the landscape itself, their surfaces covered with plants that generated energy from sunlight. Transportation moved through tubes of flowing air that carried people and goods without any visible machinery. Captain, these energy readings are off the charts, Lieutenant Kekstar reported, his voice filled with awe. Each building is generating its own power, and they're all connected in a network that shares energy across the entire continent. It's the most efficient power grid I've ever seen. They landed in a clearing surrounded by structures that looked more like sculptures than buildings. A small group of humans waited for them, dressed in simple clothes that seemed to shift color and texture as they moved. The leader of the group was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He stepped forward. As Vexandra and her officers emerged from their ship, "Captain Vexandra, I'm Engineer Ben Cooper. Welcome to New Haven. I understand you represent the Galactic Council." Vijandra tried to maintain her diplomatic composure, but she was struggling to process what she was seeing. The humans looked the same as she remembered, but everything else was different. The very air seemed to hum with energy, and she could feel a sense of harmony and purpose that was almost overwhelming. "Engineer Cooper, I need to speak with your leadership about returning to galactic civilization," she said. "The galaxy is facing multiple crises, and we believe human expertise could help resolve them." Cooper smiled, but there was sadness in his expression. "I'll take you to our council, Captain. But I should warn you, we're not the same humans who left the galaxy 3 years ago." As they walked through the settlement, Cooper explained what they were seeing. The energy-generating plants were a fusion of biology and technology that had been developed in the past 2 years. The transportation system used controlled gravity fields that required no fuel or maintenance. The buildings were constructed from materials that could repair themselves and adapt to changing environmental conditions. "How is this possible?" Vexandra asked. 3 years ago, human technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. "It was primitive by galactic standards," Cooper replied. "But galactic standards were focused on power, efficiency, and control. We decided to focus on harmony, sustainability, and cooperation instead." They entered a large building that seemed to be alive. The walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns, and the air was filled with a soft music that came from no visible source. At the center of the space, a group of humans sat in a circle, discussing what appeared to be agricultural improvements. One of them, a woman with silver hair and bright blue eyes, looked up as they approached. "Ben, is this our visitor from the Galactic Council?" "Captain Vixandra, this is Dr. Carol Davis, one of our research coordinators," Cooper said. Dr. Davis stood and greeted Vixandra with genuine warmth. "Captain, we've been monitoring galactic communications. We know about the economic collapse, the research stagnation, and the diplomatic crises. We're truly sorry that so many beings are suffering. Then you'll help us?" Vexandra asked hopefully. Dr. Davis gestured for them to sit. "Captain, let me show you something that might help you understand our situation." She activated a device that projected a 3-dimensional image into the air above them. It showed a human body, but at the cellular level. "This is what we call a regeneration matrix. It can regrow damaged organs, reverse aging, and eliminate most diseases. We developed it 18 months ago." Vexandra stared at the image in amazement. Medical technology like this was theoretically possible, but no species in the galaxy had been able to make it work in practice. "How?" she whispered. "By stopping our attempts to control biological processes and learning to cooperate with them. Instead," Dr. Davis explained, "galactic medical science tries to force the body to do what we want. We learn to ask the body what it needs and help it heal itself." Another human, a young man who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Captain, I'm Nick Johnson, our External Affairs Coordinator. I think there's something you need to understand about why we left." Nick activated another display, this one showing communication records from their time in the galaxy. "For 50 years, we tried to contribute to galactic civilization. Every time we proposed a new idea, we were told it was too simple. Every time we offered to help with a problem, we were told our methods were primitive. Every time we warned about consequences, we were told we were being emotional. The record showed meeting after meeting where human representatives had tried to share their knowledge, only to be dismissed or ignored. Vexandra recognized many of the scenes. She had been present at some of these meetings herself. "We weren't angry," Nick continued. "We were disappointed. We realized that the galaxy didn't want partners. It wanted servants. It didn't want our ideas. It wanted our labor. So we decided to leave and see what we could accomplish on our own." Dr. Davis stood and walked to a window that looked out over the settlement. "Captain, in 3 years, we've solved problems that galactic science has been working on for centuries. We've eliminated scarcity, ended aging, mastered clean energy, and created sustainable technology that works with natural systems instead of against them." "Then surely you can see that the galaxy needs this knowledge," Maxandra pleaded. "Billions of beings are suffering because of problems you could solve." The humans looked at each other with expressions that Vexandra couldn't quite read. Finally, Nick spoke. "Captain, we've been monitoring galactic communications since we left. We know exactly what's happening. The economic collapse could be prevented with better financial algorithms. The research stagnation could be ended with more collaborative methods. The diplomatic crises could be resolved with patient mediation. Then why won't you help?" Nick's expression was gentle but firm. "Captain, we tried to help for 50 years. Every solution we offered was rejected. Every warning we gave was ignored. Every contribution we made was dismissed. We're not going to force our help on beings who have made it clear they don't want it." Cooper stepped forward. "Captain, there's something else you need to understand. We're not the same species that left the galaxy. We've grown beyond the need for galactic civilization. We don't need your trade networks, your military protection, or your political systems. We've created something better." Vexandra felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She had come here expecting to find desperate refugees who would be grateful for a chance to return home. Instead, she had found a civilization that had surpassed everything the galaxy had to offer. "What do you need from us?" she asked quietly. "Nothing," Dr. Davis replied simply. "We're completely self-sufficient now. We have everything we need to thrive for thousands of years." The weight of this realization settled over Vexandra like a heavy blanket. Humanity hadn't just left the galaxy. They had transcended it. They had moved so far beyond their former partners that return was not just unlikely, but unnecessary. As she prepared to leave empty-handed, Vexandra realized that her mission had failed before it even began. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen anything like it. For the first time in over 300 years, every seat was filled. Species that had been enemies for generations sat side by side. Ancient rivals put aside their differences. The economic collapse and social chaos had finally forced the galaxy to unite around a single desperate goal: bringing humanity back. Council Speaker Threnody floated at the center of the assembly, her jellyfish-like form pulsing with nervous energy. The reports from Captain Vexandra's expedition had shaken the very foundations of galactic civilization. Humanity hadn't just survived their departure. They had evolved into something beyond galactic comprehension. "Members of the Council," Threnody announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "we face the greatest crisis in our recorded history. Our economy is collapsing, our research has stagnated, and our diplomatic systems are failing. We have discovered that all of these problems stem from a single source: the loss of human participation in galactic civilization." A murmur ran through the assembly. Even now, many species found it difficult to accept that humans, the species they had dismissed as primitive and emotional, had been so essential to their survival that Ambassador Zex III of the Velteran Empire rose to speak. "Council Speaker, I have reviewed the evidence presented by Captain Vexandra. The human civilization she discovered represents technology that is centuries beyond our current capabilities. How do we convince beings who have transcended our level of development to return and help us? That is why we are here, Threnody replied. Today we will form an official diplomatic mission to humanity. We will offer them everything we can. Equal representation in the Council, shared governance of galactic resources, territorial concessions, even military protection if they require it. General Kextan of the Zephyrian military stood up, his imposing figure commanding attention. With respect, Council Speaker, what can we offer beings who no longer need anything we have? Captain Vexandra's reports indicate that humanity has solved every problem we face, and many we haven't even recognized yet. The question hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time in galactic history, they were preparing to negotiate from a position of complete weakness. They had nothing to offer and everything to gain. We offer them the chance to save billions of lives, Threnody said finally. Surely beings who were once our partners will not watch the galaxy destroy itself when they have the power to prevent it. 3 weeks later, the largest diplomatic fleet in galactic history arrived at the human system. 50 ships carrying representatives from every major species, along with complete documentation of the galactic crisis and detailed proposals for human reintegration into galactic society. The fleet was met by a single, small ship that guided them to a space station orbiting the third planet. The station was beautiful in a way that defied description, its organic curves and flowing lines suggesting growth rather than construction. It seemed to be alive, responding to their approach with gentle pulses of light that felt welcoming rather than threatening. Dr. Peter Morgan waited for them in a conference room that looked more like a garden. Plants covered the walls, generating soft light and clean air. Water flowed in impossible patterns through the room, creating a sense of peace that many of the delegates had never experienced before. Dr. Morgan was an elderly human with white hair and eyes that seemed to hold infinite patience. He greeted each delegate personally, speaking to them in their own languages and showing genuine interest in their cultures and concerns. "Welcome," he said once everyone was seated. "I represent the Human Council, and I want you to know that we are honored by your visit. We understand you're facing serious difficulties, and we're sorry for the suffering this has caused." Council. Speaker Threnody floated forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite her nervousness. "Dr. Morgan, we come to you with formal apologies from the Galactic Council. We recognize that we failed to appreciate humanity's contributions to our civilization. We ask for your forgiveness and your help." Dr. Morgan nodded thoughtfully. "Council Speaker, your apology is accepted. We harbor no anger toward any of your species. We understand that fear and pride can make it difficult to see clearly sometimes. Then you'll help us?" asked Ambassador Zexthery hopefully. "That's a complex question," Dr. Morgan replied. "Let me show you something that might help. You understand our situation." He activated a device that filled the room with three-dimensional images. The delegates found themselves surrounded by views of human settlements across dozens of worlds. Cities that lived and breathed, transportation systems that moved like flowing water, energy networks that pulsed with the rhythm of life itself. "Is what we've built in the 3 years since we left," Dr. Morgan explained. "We've learned to work with natural systems instead of against them. We've eliminated scarcity by creating abundance. We've ended conflict by removing the sources of competition." General Kextan leaned forward, studying the images with professional interest. "Dr. Morgan, this technology could solve every problem the galaxy faces. Surely you can see the moral obligation to share it." Dr. Morgan's expression remained patient, but there was sadness in his eyes. "General, we tried to share our ideas for 50 years. Every proposal was rejected, every suggestion was dismissed, every warning was ignored. We were told our methods were too simple, our thinking was too primitive, our emotions made us unreliable. But that was a mistake, protested Dr. Yanara of the Cetacean Research Institute. We realize now that we were wrong to dismiss your contributions. Yes, it was. A mistake, Dr. Morgan agreed. But it wasn't just one mistake. It was a pattern that continued for decades. It revealed something fundamental about how galactic civilization views cooperation, learning, and growth. Captain Susan Blake entered the room, carrying a data tablet that she handed to Dr. Morgan. She was younger than him, with brown hair and eyes that held the same infinite patience. Council delegates, she said, we've been monitoring galactic communications since our departure. We know about every crisis you're facing, every problem that needs solving, every conflict that threatens to escalate into war. Then surely you'll help, said Director Zarathil of the Altarian Banking Consortium. Captain Blake activated another display, this one showing economic models and social projections. We've spent the past 3 years developing solutions to every problem the galaxy faces. We have the economic algorithms that could stabilize your currencies. We have the diplomatic protocols that could resolve your conflicts. We have the technological innovations that could end scarcity and suffering across hundreds of worlds. The delegates leaned forward eagerly, finally seeing hope for their crisis. But Captain Blake continued, we're not going to force these solutions on you. We've learned that real growth only happens when beings choose to change, not when change is imposed from outside. The hope in the room began to fade as the implications became clear. Dr. Morgan stood and walked to the center of the room. Council delegates were going to give you something, but it's not what you came here expecting. He activated a final display that filled the room with data streams, technical specifications, and detailed instructions. This database contains solutions to every crisis currently facing galactic civilization. Economic stabilization protocols, conflict resolution frameworks, technological innovations, medical breakthroughs, agricultural improvements, everything you need to not just survive, but thrive. The delegates stared at the information in amazement. It was more advanced knowledge than they had dared to hope for. This is freely given, Dr. Morgan continued, just as everything we offered during our 50 years in the galaxy was freely given. We ask for nothing in return, and we place no conditions on its use. But you'll come back to help us implement it? Asked Threnody desperately. Dr. Morgan shook his head gently. No, Council Speaker, we won't be returning. This knowledge is our final gift to galactic civilization. Captain Blake stepped forward. You see, we've learned something important during our time away. The galaxy didn't need us to solve its problems. It needed to learn how to solve them itself. For 50 years, we made the mistake of trying to give you answers instead of teaching you how to find them. What do you mean? Asked General Caxton. We mean that true growth comes from within. Dr. Morgan explained. As long as you depend on others to solve your problems, you'll never develop the wisdom and strength to solve them yourself. We were enabling your dependence instead of fostering your independence. The terrible truth settled over the delegates. Like a cold fog, humanity wasn't refusing to help out of anger or spite. They were refusing to help out of love, the tough love of a parent who knows that children must learn to walk on their own. Captain Blake smiled sadly at the assembled delegates. We believe in you, all of you. You have the intelligence, the creativity, and the potential to solve every problem you face. You just need to stop looking for someone else to do it for you. Dr. Morgan gestured to the data that surrounded them. Use this knowledge or don't use it. The choice is yours. Modify it, improve it, or ignore it entirely. We trust you to make the right decisions for your own civilizations.